You are listening to PastThink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you. Chapter 27. Beauty Perspiring Sports with Butterflies. By the Raindrop Pavilion. And Beauty Suspiring Weeps for Fallen Blossoms. By the Flower's Grave. To continue our story. As Dayu stood there weeping, there was a sudden creak of the courtyard gate, and Bao Chai walked out, accompanied by Bao Yu with Aroma, and a bevy of other maids who had come out to see her off. Dayu was on the point of stepping forward to question Bao Yu, but shrank from embarrassing him in front of so many people. Instead she slipped back into the shadows to let Bao Chai pass, emerging only when Bao Yu and the rest were back inside, and the gate was once more barred. She stood for a while facing it, and shed a few silent tears. Then, realizing that it was pointless to remain standing there, she turned and went back to her room and began, in a listless, mechanical manner, to take off her ornaments and prepare herself for the night. Nightingale and Snowgoose had long since become habituated to Dayu's moody temperament. They were used to her unaccountable fits of depression, when she would sit, the picture of misery, in gloomy silence broken only by an occasional gusty sigh, and to her mysterious, perpetual weeping, that was occasioned by no observable cause. At first they had tried to reason with her, or, imagining that she must be grieving for her parents, or that she was feeling homesick, or had been upset by some unkindness, they would do their best to comfort her. But as the months lengthened into years, and she still continued exactly the same as before, they gradually became accustomed, and no longer sought reasons for her behavior. That was why they ignored her on this occasion, and left her alone to her misery, remaining where they were in the outer room, and continuing to occupy themselves with their own affairs. She sat, motionless as a statue, leaning against the back of the bed, her hands clasped about her knees, her eyes full of tears. It had already been dark for some hours when she finally lay down to sleep. Our story passes over the rest of that night in silence. Next day was the 26th of the 4th month, the day on which, this year, the festival of grain in ear was due to fall. To be precise, the festival's official commencement was on the 26th day of the 4th month at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It has been the custom from time immemorial to make offerings to the flower fairies on this day. For grain in ear marks the beginning of summer. It is about this time that the blossom begins to fall, and tradition has it that the flower spirits, their work now completed, go away on this day, and do not return until the following year. The offerings are therefore thought of as a sort of farewell party for the flowers. This charming custom of speeding the fairies is a special favorite with the fair sex, and in Prospect Garden all the girls were up betimes on this day making little coaches and palanquins out of willow twigs and flowers, and little banners and pennants from scraps of brocade, and any other pretty material they could find, which they fastened with threads of colored silk to the tops of flowering trees and shrubs. Soon every plant and tree was decorated, and the whole garden had become a shimmering sea of nodding blossoms and fluttering colored streamers. Moving about in the midst of it all, the girls in their brilliant summer dresses, beside which the most vivid hues of plant and plumage became faint with envy, added the final touch of brightness to a scene of indescribable gaiety and color. All the young people, Bao Chai, Ying Chun, Tan Chun, Shi Chun, Li Wan, Shi Feng and her little girl and Caltrip, and all the maids from all the different apartments, were outside in the garden enjoying themselves, all, that is, except Dayu, whose absence, beginning to be noticed, was first commented on by Ying Chun. "What's happened to Cousin Lin? Lazy girl. Surely she can't still be in bed at this hour?" Bao Chai volunteered to go and fetch her. "The rest of you wait here, I'll go and rout her out for you," she said, and breaking away from the others, she made off in the direction of the Naiad's house. While she was on her way, she caught sight of Elegante and the 11 other little actresses, evidently on their way to join in the fun. They came up and greeted her, and for a while she stood and chatted with them. As she was leaving them, she turned back and pointed in the direction from which she had just come. "You'll find the others somewhere over there," she said. "I'm on my way to get Miss Linear. I'll join the rest of you presently." She continued, by the circuitous route that the garden's contours obliged her to take, on her way to the Naiad's house. Raising her eyes as she approached it, she suddenly became aware that the figure ahead of her just disappearing inside it was Bao Yu. She stopped and lowered her eyes pensively again to the ground. Bao Yu and Dai Yu have known each other since they were little, she reflected. They are used to behaving uninhibitedly when they are alone together. They don't seem to care what they say to one another, and one is never quite sure what sort of mood one is going to find them in. And Dai Yu, at the best of times, is always so touchy and suspicious. If I go in now after him, he is sure to feel embarrassed and she is sure to start imagining things. It would be better to go back without seeing her. Her mind made up, she turned round and began to retrace her steps, intending to go back to the other girls, but just at that moment she noticed two enormous turquoise-colored butterflies a little way ahead of her, each as large as a child's fan, fluttering and dancing on the breeze. She watched them fascinated and thought she would like to play a game with them. Taking a fan from inside her sleeve and holding it outspread in front of her, she followed them off the path and into the grass. To and fro fluttered the pair of butterflies, sometimes alighting for a moment, but always flying off again before she could reach them. Once they seemed on the point of flying across the little river that flowed through the midst of the garden, and Bao Chai had to stalk them with bated breath for fear of startling them out onto the water. By the time she had reached the raindrop pavilion, she was perspiring freely, and her interest in the butterflies was beginning to evaporate. She was about to turn back when she became aware of a low murmur of voices coming from inside the pavilion. Raindrop Pavilion was built in such a way that it projected into the middle of the pool into which the little watercourse widened out at this point, so that on three of its sides it looked out onto the water. It was surrounded by a veranda, whose railing followed the many angles formed by the bays and projections of the base. In each of its wooden walls there was a large paper-covered casement of elegantly patterned latticework. Hearing voices inside the pavilion, Bao Chai halted and inclined her ear to listen. "Are you sure this is your handkerchief?" one of the voices was saying. "If it is, take it, but if it isn't, I must return it to Mr. Yun." "Of course it's mine," said the second voice. "Come on, let me have it." "Are you going to give me a reward? I hope I haven't taken all this trouble for nothing." "I promised you I would give you a reward, and so I shall. Surely you don't think I was deceiving you?" "All right, I get a reward for bringing it to you. But what about the person who picked it up? Doesn't he get anything?" "Don't talk nonsense," said the second voice. "He's one of the masters. A master picking up something belonging to one of us should give it back as a matter of course. How can there be any question of rewarding him? If you don't intend to reward him, what am I supposed to tell him when I see him? He was most insistent that I wasn't to give you the handkerchief unless you gave him a reward." There was a long pause, after which the second voice replied. "Oh, all right. Let him have this other handkerchief of mine then. That will have to do as his reward, but you must swear a solemn oath not to tell anyone else about this." "May my mouth rot and may I die a horrible death if I ever tell anyone else about this, amen," said the first voice. "Goodness," said the second voice again. "Here we are talking away, and all the time someone could be creeping up outside and listening to every word we say. We had better open these casements, then even if anyone outside sees us, they'll think we are having an ordinary conversation, and we shall be able to see them and know in time when to stop." Bao Chai, listening outside, gave a start. No wonder they say venery and thievery sharpen the wits, she thought. If they open those windows and see me here, they are going to feel terribly embarrassed. And one of those voices sounds like that proud, peculiar girl Crimson, who works in Bao Yu's room. If a girl like that knows that I have overheard her doing something she shouldn't be doing, it will be a case of the desperate dog will jump a wall, the desperate man will hazard all, there'll be a great deal of trouble, and I shall be involved in it. There isn't time to hide. I shall have to do as the cicada does when he jumps out of his skin, give them something to put them off the scent. There was a loud creak as the casement yielded. Bao Chai advanced with deliberately noisy tread. "Frowner," she called out gaily. "I know where you're hiding." Inside the pavilion, Crimson and Trinket, who heard her say this and saw her advancing towards them just as they were opening the casement, were speechless with amazement, but Bao Chai ignored their confusion and addressed them genially. "Have you two got Miss Lin hidden away in there?" "I haven't seen Miss Lin," said Trinket. "I saw her just now from the riverbank," said Bao Chai. "She was squatting down over here playing with something in the water. I was going to creep up and surprise her, but she spotted me before I could get up to her and disappeared round this corner." "Are you sure she's not hiding in there?" "She made a point of going inside the pavilion and searching, then, coming out again," she said in a voice loud enough for them to hear. "If she's not in the pavilion, she must have crept into that grotto. Oh well, if she's not afraid of being bitten by a snake." As she walked away, she laughed inwardly at the ease with which she had extricated herself from a difficult situation. "I think I'm fairly safely out of that one," she thought. "I wonder what those two will make of it." What indeed? Crimson believed every word that Bao Chai had said, and as soon as the latter was at a distance, she seized hold of Trinket in alarm. "Oh, how terrible! If Miss Lin was squatting there, she must have heard what we said before she went away." Her companion was silent. "Oh dear. What do you think she'll do?" said Crimson. "Well, suppose she did hear," said Trinket, "it's not her backache. If we mind our business and she minds hers, there's no reason why anything should come of it." "If it were Miss Bao that had heard us, I don't suppose anything would," said Crimson, "but Miss Lin is so critical and so intolerant. If she heard it and it gets about, oh dear." But just at that moment Caltrop, Advent, Chess and Scribe were seen approaching the pavilion, and Crimson and Trinket had to drop the subject in a hurry and join in a general conversation. Crimson noticed Xifeng standing halfway up the rockery above the little grotto, beckoning. Breaking away from the others, she bounded up to her with a smiling face. "What can I do for you, madam?" Xifeng ran an appraising eye over her. A neat, pretty, pleasantly spoken girl, she decided, and smiled at her graciously. "I have come here without my maids and need someone to take a message back to my apartment. I wonder if you are clever enough to get it right." "Tell me the message, madam. If I don't get it right and make a mess of it, it will be up to you to punish me." "Which of the young ladies do you work for?" said Xifeng. "I'd better know, so that I can explain to her if she asks for you while you are doing my errand." "I work for Master Bao," said Crimson. Xifeng laughed. "Aha! You work for Master Bao. No wonder. Very well, then, if he asks for you while you are away, I shall explain. I want you to go to my apartment and tell Patience that there is a roll of money under the stand of the roux-ware dish on the table in the outside room. There are 120 taels of silver in it to pay the embroiderers with. Tell her that when Zhang Kai's wife comes for it, she is to weigh it out in front of her before handing it over. And there's one other thing. There's a little purse at the head of the bed in my inside room. I want you to bring it to me." "Yes, madam," said Crimson, and hurried off. Returning shortly afterwards, she found that Xifeng was no longer on the rockery, but Chess had just emerged from the little grotto beneath it, and was standing there doing up her sash. Crimson ran down to speak to her. "Excuse me, did you see where Mrs. Lien went to?" "'Fraid I didn't notice," said Chess. Crimson looked around her. Bao Chai and Tanchun were standing at the edge of the pool looking at the fish. She went up to them. "Excuse me, does either of you young ladies happen to know where Mrs. Lien went to just now, please?" "Try Mrs. Ju's place," said Tanchun. Crimson hurried off in the direction of Sweet Rice Village. On her way she ran head-on into a party of maids consisting of Skybright, Mackerel, Emerald, Ripple, Musk, Scribe, Picture and Oriole. "Here, what are you gaddying about like this for?" said Skybright as soon as she saw who it was. "The flowers want watering, the birds need feeding, the stove for the tea water needs seeing to. You've no business to go wandering around outside." "Master Bao gave orders yesterday that the flowers were only to be watered every other day," said Crimson. I fed the birds when you were still fast asleep in bed. What about the stove? Said Emerald. It isn't my day for the stove, said Crimson. The tea water today has nothing to do with me. Listen to Miss Pert, said Mackerel. I wouldn't bother about her, if I were you, just leave her to wander about as she pleases. I'm not wandering about, if you really want to know, said Crimson. If you really want to know, Mrs. Lien sent me outside to take a message, and to fetch something for her. She held up the purse for them to see, at which they were silent. But when they had passed each other, Skybright laughed sneeringly. You can see why she's so uppity. She's on the climb again. Look at her, all cock-a-hoop because someone's given her a little message to carry. And she probably doesn't even know who it's about. Well, one little message isn't going to get her very far. It's what happens in the long run that counts. Now if she were clever enough to climb her way right out of this garden and stay there, that would be really something. These words were spoken for Crimson to hear, but in such a way that she was unable to answer them. She had to swallow her anger and hurry on to look for Xifeng. Xifeng was in Li Wan's room, as Tan Chun had predicted, and Crimson found the two of them in conversation. She went up to Xifeng and delivered her message. Patience says that she found the silver just after you had gone, and took care of it, and she says that when Zhang Kai's wife came for it she did weigh it out in front of her before giving it to her to take away. Crimson now produced the purse and handed it to Xifeng. Then she added. Patience told me to tell you that Bridie has just been in to inquire what your instructions were for his visit, and she said that she gave him a message to take based on the things she thought you would want him to say. Oh, said Xifeng, amused. And what was this message based on the things she thought I would want him to say? She said he was to tell them, Our Lady hopes your lady is well, and she says that the master is away at present, and may not be back for another day or two, but your lady is not to worry, and when the lady from West Lane is better, Our Lady will come with their lady to see your lady. And Our Lady says that the lady from West Lane sent someone the other day with a message from the elder Lady Wang saying that she hopes Our Lady is well, and will she please see if Our Lady Wang can let her have a few of her golden myriad macrobiotic pills, and if she can, will Our Lady please send someone with them to her, because someone will be going from there to the elder Lady Wang's in a few days' time, and they will be able to take them for her. Crimson was still in full spate, when Li Wan interrupted her with a laugh. What an extraordinary number of ladies. I hope you can understand what it's all about, Feng. I'm sure I can't. I'm not surprised, said Xifeng. There are 4 or 5 different households involved in that message. She smiled graciously at Crimson. You're a clever girl, my dear, to have got it all right, not like the simpering little ninnies I usually have to put up with. You have no idea, cousin, she said, turning to Li Wan again. Apart from the 1 or 2 girls and 1 or 2 older women that I always keep about me, I just dread talking to servants nowadays. They take such an interminable time to tell you anything, so long-winded. And the airs and graces they give themselves. And the simpering. And the ing and ing. If they only knew how it makes me fume. Our Patience used to be like that when she first came to me. I used to say to her, do you think it makes you seem glamorous, all that affected humming? Like a little gnat. I had to talk to her several times about it before she would mend her ways. Li Wan laughed. I suppose if they were all peppercorns like you, it would be all right. This girl's all right, said Xifeng. Those 2 messages she gave me just now may not have been very long ones, but you could see how clear-cut her delivery of them was. She smiled at Crimson again. How would you like to come and work for me and be my goddaughter? With a little grooming from me you could go far. Crimson suppressed a giggle. Why do you laugh, said Xifeng. I suppose you think I'm too young to be your godmother. You're very silly if you think that. You just ask around a bit, there are plenty much older than you who'd give their ears to be my goddaughter. What I'm offering you is a very special favor. Crimson smiled. I wasn't laughing because of that, madam. I was laughing because you had got the generation wrong. My mother is your goddaughter already. If you made me your goddaughter too, I should be my own mother's sister. Who is your mother? Said Xifeng. Do you mean to say that you don't know who this girl is that you've been talking to all this time? Said Li Wan. This is Lin Jixiao's daughter. Xifeng registered surprise. You mean to tell me that this is the Lin's daughter? She laughed. That couple of old sticks? I can never get a peep out of either of them. I've always maintained that Lin Jixiao and his wife were the perfect match. One hears nothing and the other says nothing. Well, to think they should have produced a bright little thing like this between them. How old are you? She asked Crimson. 16. And what's your name? Crimson, madam. I used to be called Jade, but they made me change it on account of Master Bao. Xifeng looked away with a frown of displeasure. I should think so too, she muttered. Odious people. One can hear them saying it, we've got a Jade in our family the same as you, or some such impertinence. She turning to Li Wan again. I don't think you know, Wan, but I told this girl's mother that as Lai Da's wife is so busy nowadays that she doesn't even know who half the girls in the household are any longer. I wanted her to pick out a couple of likely-looking girls to work under me. Now she promised that she would do this, but you see, not only has she not done so, but she's actually gone and sent her own daughter to work for someone else. Do you suppose she really thinks her girl would have had such a terrible time with me? Don't be so touchy, said Li Wan. Her mother is not to blame. The girl had already started service in the garden before you ever spoke to her about it. Oh well, in that case, said Xifeng, recovering her good humor, I'll have a word with Bao Yu about it tomorrow. I'll tell him to find someone else, and let me have this girl to work under me. Still, she turned to Crimson, perhaps we ought to ask the party most concerned if she is willing. Crimson smiled. As to being willing or not, madam, I don't think it's my place to say. But I do know this, that if I was to work for you, I should get to know what's what in all the inside and outside of household management. I'm sure it would be a wonderful experience. Just then a maid arrived from Lady Wang's asking for Xifeng, who promptly excused herself to Li Wan and left. Crimson returned to Green Delights, where our story now leaves her. We now return to Dai Yu, who, having slept so little the night before, was very late getting up on the morning of the festival. Hearing that the other girls were all out in the garden speeding the fairies, and fearing to be teased by them for her lazy habits, she hurried over her toilet, and went out as soon as it was completed. A smiling Bao Yu appeared in the gateway, as she was stepping down into the courtyard. Well, cuz, he said, I hope you didn't tell on me yesterday. You had me worrying about it all last night. Dai Yu turned back, ignoring him, to address Nightingale inside. When you do the room, leave one of the casements open so that the parrot swallows can get in. And put the lion doorstop on the bottom of the blind to stop it flapping. And don't forget to put the cover back on the burner after you've lighted the incense. She made her way across the courtyard, still ignoring him. Bao Yu, who knew nothing of the little drama that had taken place outside his gate the night before, assumed that she was still angry about his unfortunate lapse earlier on that same day, when he had offended her susceptibilities with a somewhat risque quotation from the Western Chamber. He offered her now, with energetic bowing and hand pumping, the apologies that the previous day's emergency had caused him to neglect. But Dai Yu walked straight past him and out of the gate, not deigning so much as a glance in his direction, and stalked off in search of the others. Bao Yu was nonplussed. He began to suspect that something more than he had first imagined must be wrong. Surely it can't only be because of yesterday lunchtime that she's carrying on in this fashion? There must be something else. On the other hand, I didn't get back until late, and I didn't see her again last night, so how could I have offended her? Preoccupied with these reflections, he followed her at some distance behind. Not far ahead, Bao Chai and Tan Chun were watching the ungainly courtship dance of some storks. When they saw Dai Yu coming, they invited her to join them, and the three girls stood together and chatted. Then Bao Yu arrived. Tan Chun greeted him with sisterly concern. How have you been keeping, Bao? It's 3 whole days since I saw you last. Bao Yu smiled back at her. How have you been keeping, sis? I was asking cousin Wan about you the day before yesterday. Come over here a minute, said Tan Chun. I want to talk to you. He followed her into the shade of a pomegranate tree a little way apart from the other two. Has father asked to see you at all during this last day or two? Tan Chun began. No. I thought I heard someone say yesterday that he had been asking for you. No, said Bao Yu, smiling at her concern. Whoever it was mistaken. He certainly hasn't asked for me. Tan Chun smiled and changed the subject. During the past few months, she said, I've managed to save up another 10 strings or so of cash. I'd like you to take it again like you did last time, and next time you go out, if you see a nice painting or calligraphic scroll, or some amusing little thing that would do for my room, I'd like you to buy it for me. Well, I don't know, said Bao Yu. In the trips I make to bazaars and temple fairs, whether it's inside the city or roundabout, I can't say that I ever see anything really nice or out of the ordinary. It's all bronzes and jades and porcelain and that sort of stuff. Apart from that, it's mostly dressmaking materials and clothes and things to eat. Now what would I want things like that for, said Tan Chun. No, I mean something like that little wickerwork basket you bought me last time, or the little box carved out of bamboo root, or the little clay burner. I thought they were sweet. Unfortunately, the others took such a fancy to them that they carried them off as loot and wouldn't give them back to me again. Oh, if those are the sort of things you want, said Bao Yu laughing, it's very simple. Just give a few strings of cash to one of the boys and he'll bring you back a whole cartload of them. What do the boys know about it, said Tan Chun. I need someone who can pick out the interesting things and the ones that are in good taste. You get me lots of nice little things, and I'll embroider a pair of slippers for you like the ones I made for you last time, only this time I'll do them more carefully. Talking of those slippers reminds me, said Bao Yu. I happened to run into father once when I was wearing them. He was most displeased. When he asked me who made them, I naturally didn't dare to tell him that you had, so I said that Aunt Wang had given them to me as a birthday present a few days before. There wasn't much he could do about it when he heard that they came from Aunt Wang, so after a very long pause he just said, what a pointless waste of human effort and valuable material to produce things like that. I told this to Aroma when I got back, and she said, oh, that's nothing. You should have heard your Aunt Zhao complaining about those slippers. She was furious when she heard about them, her own natural brother so down at heel he scarcely dares show his face to people, and she spends her time making things like that. Tan Chun's smile had vanished. How can she talk such nonsense? Why should I be the one to make shoes for him? Huan gets a clothing allowance, doesn't he? He gets his clothing and footwear provided for the same as all the rest of us. And fancy saying a thing like that in front of a roomful of servants. For whose benefit was this remark made, I wonder? I make an occasional pair of slippers just for something to do in my spare time, and if I give a pair to someone I particularly like, that's my own affair. Surely no one else has any business to start telling me who I should give them to? Oh, she's so petty. Bao Yu shook his head. Perhaps you're being a bit hard on her. She's probably got her reasons. This made Tan Chun really angry. Her chin went up defiantly. Now you're being as stupid as her. Of course she's got her reasons, but they are ignorant, stupid reasons. But she can think what she likes, as far as I am concerned. Sir Jia is my father and Lady Wang is my mother, and who was born in whose room doesn't interest me. The way I choose my friends inside the family has nothing to do with that. Oh, I know I shouldn't talk about her like this, but she is so idiotic about these things. As a matter of fact, I can give you an even better example than your story of the slippers. That last time I gave you my savings to get something for me, she saw me a few days afterwards and started telling me how short of money she was and how difficult things were for her. I took no notice, of course. But later, when the maids were out of the room, she began attacking me for giving the money I'd saved to other people instead of giving it to Juan. Really? I didn't know whether to laugh or get angry with her. In the end, I just walked out of the room and went round to see Mother. There was an amused interruption at this point from Bao Chai, who was still standing where they had left her a few minutes before. Do finish your talking and come back soon. It's easy to see that you two are brother and sister. As soon as you see each other, you get into a huddle and start talking about family secrets. Would it really be such a disaster if anything you are saying were to be overheard? Tan Chun and Bao Yu rejoined her, laughing. Not seeing Dai Yu, Bao Yu realized that she must have slipped off elsewhere while he was talking. Better leave it a day or two, he told himself on reflection. Wait until her anger has calmed down a bit. While he was looking downwards and meditating, he noticed that the ground where they were standing was carpeted with a bright profusion of wind-blown flowers, pomegranate, and balsam for the most part. You can see she's upset, he thought ruefully. She's neglecting her flowers. I'll bury this lot for her and remind her about it next time I see her. He became aware that Bao Chai was arranging for him and Tan Chun to go with her outside. I'll join you two presently, he said, and waited until they were a little way off before stooping down to gather the fallen blossoms into the skirt of his gown. It was quite a way from where he was to the place where Dai Yu had buried the peach blossom on that previous occasion, but he made his way towards it, over rocks and bridges and through plantations of trees and flowers. When he had almost reached his destination, and there was only the spur of a miniature mountain between him and the burial place of the flowers, he heard the sound of a voice, coming from the other side of the rock, whose continuous, gentle chiding was occasionally broken by the most pitiable and heart-rending sobs. It must be a maid from one of the apartments, thought Bao Yu. Someone has been ill-treating her, and she has run here to cry on her own. He stood still and endeavored to catch what the weeping girl was saying. She appeared to be reciting something. The blossoms fade and falling fill the air. Of fragrance and bright hues bereft and bare. Floss drifts and flutters round the maiden's bower. Or softly strikes against her curtained door. The maid, grieved by these signs of spring's decease, seeking some means her sorrow to express, has rake in hand into the garden gone, before the fallen flowers are trampled on. Elm pods and willow floss are fragrant too. Why care, maid, where the fallen flowers blew? Next year, when peach and plum tree bloom again, which of your sweet companions will remain? This spring the heartless swallow built his nest beneath the eaves of mud with flowers compressed. Next year the flowers will blossom as before, but swallow, nest, and maid will be no more. 303 score the year's full tale. From swords of frost and from the slaughtering gale. How can the lovely flowers long stay intact? Or, once loosed, from their drifting fate draw back? Blooming so steadfast, fallen so hard to find. Beside the flower's grave, with sorrowing mind, the solitary maid sheds many a tear, which on the boughs as bloody drops appear. At twilight, when the cuckoo sings no more, the maiden with her rake goes in at door, and lays her down between the lamplit walls, while a chill rain against the window falls. I know not why my heart's so strangely sad, half grieving for the spring and yet half glad. Glad that it came, grieved it so soon was spent. So soft it came, so silently it went. Last night, outside, a mournful sound was heard. The spirits of the flowers and of the bird. But neither bird nor flowers would long delay. Bird lacking speech, and flowers too shy to stay. And then I wished that I had wings to fly after the drifting flowers across the sky. Across the sky to the world's farthest end. The flowers' last fragrant resting place to find. But better their remains in silk to lay, and bury underneath the wholesome clay. Pure substances the pure earth to enrich. then leave to soak and stink in some foul ditch. Can I, that these flowers' obsequies attend, divine how soon or late my life will end? Let others laugh flower burial to see. Another year who will be burying me? As petals drop and spring begins to fail, the bloom of youth, too, sickens and turns pale. One day, when spring has gone and youth has fled, the maiden and the flowers will both be dead. All this was uttered in a voice half-choked with sobs, for the words recited seemed only to inflame the grief of the reciter. Indeed, Bao Yu, listening on the other side of the rock, was so overcome by them that he had already flung himself weeping upon the ground. But the sequel to this painful scene will be told in the following chapter. You are listening to PastThink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you.